What up, fam? Welcome back to another lesson with Mr. Biza, and in today's lesson, we're going to be working on volume of cylinders. So let's get in it. Remember, volume is the amount of 3D space an object takes up. So when we're working on these problems, we're putting in the back of our head, we're looking for the cylinder and how much space a cylinder takes up. So whenever we're going to find the volume of a cylinder, we're multiplying the area of our base times the height. We're still going to be using that same formula like we did for prisms. When we did the prisms, we used the formula volume equals big B times H. But in these problems, we're going to change our formula just a little bit because the area of our base for a cylinder is now a circle. The letter V stands for volume, in this case of a cylinder. The B stands for the area of our base, a circle, and the H stands for the height, or the distance between our two bases. So, when I rewrite this formula, when we're talking about cylinders, I'm changing this part right here, the area of our base, to represent the area for a circle. So I'm still going to have volume equals, and instead of big B, the area of a circle we say is pi r squared times the height. Alright, so let's go ahead and look at one of these problems so we can work it out. Alright, so here I have my cylinder. So whenever I'm trying to find the volume of my cylinder, the first thing I like to do is make my table to help me figure out all the steps I need to do to find the area of a cylinder. So the first thing I'm going to do is set up that table. Alright, so right here I set up my table. I'm solving for a cylinder. First step is to write down my formula. So remember that whenever we're working with prisms and cylinders, they have the same basic formula. V equals the area of the base, our big B, times the height, that distance between our spaces, between our faces. So, in this case, in our formula for the cylinder, the way we rewrite that formula is volume equals pi r squared times the height. This is a new formula that we use for cylinders. So my second step now is, after I write down my formula, is to go ahead and plug in those numbers and substitute. Now, substituting in these numbers is going to be pretty simple because we only have two numbers to work with in this problem. So our letter V is going to stay V as volume. Instead of pi, we're going to use the number 3 to represent pi in this problem. So for pi, I'm going to write the number 3. And I'm putting in parentheses, letting me know that I changed that number pi into the number 3. Then r squared. So the letter R stands for radius. When I look at this circle, radius is starting from the center of my circle, going all the way to the edge. So it's only halfway through that circle from the middle to the outer edge. So the radius in this problem is going to be 2 inches. So I'm going to have 2 inches squared. And then the last part is H in this problem, so the distance between my two circles. So I have a circle up here on top, I have a circle down here, and the space that's in between them is these 6 inches. Oops, almost forgot to write my inches right there. Alright, so our substituted value is the volume equals 3 for pi times our 2 inches, and then we're going to square it, times 6 inches. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and do our last step, which is to go ahead and solve it. So let's go ahead and do the math. Alright, so we went ahead and worked out that math for this problem. So we started off with volume equals 3 times 2 inches squared times 6 inches. So my first step is I went ahead and did my exponent first. So I'd have 3, and then 2 times 2, because 2 squared, That gives me 4. And my inches are also going to be squared. Times our 6 inches. My next step, I multiply 3 times 4, gives me 12, still with inches squared, times the last part of my height was 6 inches. And my last step now was 12 times 6. That gives me 72. And since I had inches squared times another inch, so I have inches squared and another inch, so that makes 3 of them. So my answer is going to be in inches cubed. So remember, this is a 3D shape that we're working with. So our units are always going to be to the power of 3, just like a 3D shape. So let's look at one more example while I'm working on that. Make sure you hit like and subscribe, all right? Alright, so here I have my new shape, my cylinder. As you notice, this cylinder is kind of sideways instead of being straight up and down for the bases. But we can still work on it because it's still a cylinder. Alright, so my first step is, whenever I'm trying to solve these problems, is to set up my table so I know all the steps. So let's go ahead and start setting up that table. Alright, so I have 2 circles that are connected by this lateral space. So I know I'm going to be using that formula, volume equals base, or big B, times H. So remember, since we're working with circles, instead of the area of my base being this big B, I rewrite my formula as V equals pi r squared times the height. Alright. So there's my first step. I set it up, cylinders. I wrote my first step, the volume formula. And now my next step is to go ahead and substitute. Alright, so I'm substituting to figure out what is the volume. So I'm still looking for the V. I don't know what the volume is. Instead of pi, I'm going to change that to the number 3. So we're using 3 as our number for pi. Then I'm multiplying it times our radius squared. Remember, the radius is going from the center of our circle to the edge. Now, this is telling me 8. That would be all the way across our circle. So that would be called the diameter. Diameter is when I have my radius and another radius to connect it across that whole circle from edge to edge. But radius is just from the center to the edge, so it's only going halfway. So if I have half of 8, that's going to be 4. So 4 centimeters, and I need to square all of that. Then the last part is times our height, and the height is just the distance between our 2 circles. So my circle's right here, my other circle's over here, and the distance between those circles is 10 centimeters. Alright, so let's go ahead and do the math. Alright, so here I worked out the problem. We started with our formula, we went ahead and substituted, and then our last step is we went ahead and solved for our answer. So after I substituted in those numbers, the first step I did is I had to do my exponent and get this 4 centimeters squared. So when I squared it, 4 times 4 equals 16, and centimeters times centimeters gives me centimeters squared. So now we have 3 times 16 centimeters squared times 10 centimeters. My next step, I multiplied 3 and 16, so I'm going from left to right when I'm multiplying. So 3 times 16 gives me 48. I still have just centimeters squared. And the last step is right here, times 10 centimeters. So 48 centimeters squared times the 10 centimeters. Well, I'm multiplying by 10, so I'm putting that extra 0 right there. So 480 centimeters cubed, because centimeters squared times centimeters equals centimeters cubed, centimeters to the power of the 3. And remember, whenever I'm doing volume, since I was working with a 3D shape, that means my volume, whenever I have volume, the units have to be to the power of 3 because it's a 3D shape. Alright guys, so if you found this video helpful, be sure to hit like and subscribe, and until next time, bye!